Hi there. Our kingdom concept for today is entitled, If Only We Could Live Our Life Over Again. The following is a fictional story. It is a fictional story about hell and the tormented souls who experience it. And they will go out and look on the bodies, the dead bodies of those who rebelled against me. The worms that eat them will not die. The fire that burns them will not be quenched. And they will be loathsome or hateful to all mankind. Isaiah 66, verse 24. I was in Boston on a business trip. As I sat on the large bed in my hotel room, I began to experience pain in my chest. I had been under a lot of stress, so I decided to get the pain checked out right after a short nap. I called down to the lobby and asked to be awakened in 2 hours, then quickly drifted off. I was half asleep, half awake when the awareness came that the pain in my chest was worsening. I had noticed from the window of the taxi a multi-story hospital. The name was Saint somebody or other, I forget. I got up and went outside. I flagged down a taxi and gave the driver the direction to the hospital as well as I remembered them. When we arrived at the hospital, I went up to the desk in the waiting room and mentioned that I had chest pains. The lady called a doctor who invited me inside and listened to my heart with his stethoscope. I could tell he was concerned. He immediately got a bed assigned to me, although there were many others waiting. It was on the 5th floor. A nurse's assistant, a young man, told me to take off my clothes and put on a hospital gown. He then told me to lay down on the bed and that I will be taken downstairs to the room with the heart monitoring equipment. I felt good lying down since I usually am in a rush, going somewhere and loaded with responsibilities. Soon 2 men came into my room and took hold on the bed. They pushed the bed out in the hall. We were moving along rather swiftly. We made several turns. The hallways were well lighted. I felt comfortable as we went along. There were pictures on the walls. One time, we passed a window and I could see the traffic and people going about their business. We entered an elevator and went down to the 3rd floor. Then more hallways. I noticed that the light was becoming brighter and brighter. I began to have a queer feeling that we were not the hospital any longer. I must have died at this time. We turned a corner and there was Christ sitting on a throne. Behind the throne was a multitude of people singing something about a lamb. There was one bed ahead of me, that's the man. When the man lying on the hospital bed saw Christ, he gave a shout, sprang out of the bed and ran toward Christ. Then he joined the multitude behind the throne, lifted up his hands and began to sing about the Lamb. Then the bed disappeared. Now I was face to face with Christ. I wasn't too worried. I had seen a lot in my life. I had put 50 cents in the collection plate once. My latest transgression was to not inform the police concerning what I knew about a murder. A man who had been a friend of mine who was accused of committing the murder, and I knew he didn't do it, but I didn't I didn't think that Christ would send me to hell for not informing the authorities. I had done so many other wrong things. I couldn't see where this latest one was so bad. I could have told the authorities the truth about the murder, but I was afraid of becoming involved myself. From my bed, I could see on my left, about 20 yards away, the man I had betrayed. He appeared just like he was still in court. He was looking down, no doubt frightened. There were chains on his hands and feet. The judge read the report from the jury. The bailiff intoned, "All stand." The judge said, "You have been found guilty of murder in the first degree." You could see the prisoner tremble. He was terrified. Suddenly he lifted his hands and began to sing about the Lamb. The shackles fell from his hands and feet. He went back into the multitude around the throne. His body was still in the courtroom, but I could see his spirit. Christ looked at me, something like pity flash across the granite countenance. Then Christ looked straight ahead. He looked straight ahead. My bed disappeared. I was standing in what looked like black muck or mud or slime. I began to sink slowly. I then noticed that the black mud or slime or dirt was human excrement. The smell was horrible beyond belief. I was in an immense toilet. Christ did not look down at me. I almost cried for help. Then I thought, when did God ever help me? I had to fight my own way through life. They can keep their churches, their nuns, their choirs. I will tell them where they could put all their religious foolishness. Who needs them? As I sank into the black filth, I began to think about how hard my heart was toward religion. Many years ago, I had been a lad in Sunday school. My parents sent me, but did not go to church themselves. I remember one Sunday morning when I put some rock salt in my pockets. I found it on the trolley trucks to melt the ice. During the class, I threw some on the floor. All the kids laughed. The teacher laughed and went on with the lesson. As I remember, Christ came to me 3 times in my life. Once was when I was going home after the rock salt episode. I wondered if maybe I should not have done that and interrupted the teacher at the time when an important idea was being presented. A second time, I was in high school. I got fresh with a girl and asked her to do something nasty. She looked at me scornfully and walked away. Then Christ stood by me. He said, "That wasn't very nice." I was sullen and ignored Christ. I figured more religious talk. Third time was not so long ago. I was about 52 years old. Christ came to me and said, "You ought to be thinking about God. You are devoting all your time to making money. One day you will be standing before me, and I will ask you how you spend the business talent that I have given you." Do you remember how the nun came to you from the orphanage and asked for a donation? You had $2,000 bills in your billfold at that time. You told her, "You religious thieves are always asking for money." Do you remember that? I thought, yeah, that is the way the world is. I am not going to be ran over by those who are hustling. I will make my own pile and think about God later. That none was me in another form. How did I get so hard toward religion? I was a happy little boy when I was growing up. By this time, the filth was up to my nose. I should have been terrified. I wasn't. Everything seemed like it was supposed to be this way. I wonder how my wife would react to the news of my death. We had no children. I was too busy for that. I knew she would not be very upset. She would be well off financially. She and I had little love for each other. We lived our own lives, pursued our own interests. Then the waist was over my head. Okay, the waist. The dung was over my head and there was nothing but blackness. My eyes opened. I could see that the black mud or slime or filth filled very large pool, about 100 or more yards in width, 300 yards in length. I don't imagine all the lost souls who were here, the murderers, the rapists, the liars, and so forth. Just those who had ignored and refused Christ as I had. There were people standing around the pool with their hands joined. How many? I do not know. The line went out of sight. They were dancing, right foot forward, right foot back, left foot forward, left foot back, then 2 steps to the right, and the pattern was repeated. After a long struggle, I managed to make my way through the black slime until I was at the edge of the pool. I was covered with the filth, as were the dancers. We all were immersed in feces. Being covered with filth bothered me excessively. I am fastidious about my appearance. I had on a robe that may have been white at one time. It now was filthy black. One of the dancers reached out his hands. I took hold of it, and he or she or it lifted me and made a place next to them in the circle. I noticed that when a dancer was added, the length and width of the pole increased to compensate. So I began right foot forward, right foot back, left foot forward, left foot back, 2 steps to the right, and begin again. No one said anything, but I knew I would be doing this dance for eternity. If anyone interfered with the dance or refused to participate, they were cast into the black slime. I could see some heads bobbing around as the people attempted to get back and rejoin the dance. You would think I would be so horror-stricken that I would fall down in a faint. But as I said, it all seemed as if everything was the way it was supposed to be. My memory was faint and the future was dim. I think that after I am here long enough, I will have no memory of my past and no imagination concerning the future. Just right. Left, step, step. It was oppressively warm, about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, I would guess. I remember the story about the rich man in hell complaining because of the heat. There was no night or day, just a continual twilight. Every once in a while, a spasm would go through me. It seemed to be a part of the dance. As I said before, my situation felt normal. Like this is how life is supposed to be. There was a sense of security, knowing there will be no changes or threats in the future. That which I feared had already come upon me. There was no dread of what would happen later. The worst already was taking place and I was surviving. From the time to time, one of the dancers would scream like a maniac. I guess he or she began to realize there was no hope. They would be dancing around the black slime mat forever. Now, maybe they thought about their family and friends laughing, talking in heaven. The smell was what you would imagine. But after a while, you didn't notice it much. There was a drum beat helping us keep time with the dance. Across from me, about 100 yards away, I dimly could see the black figures on the other side of the pole. One of these people stood up straight and looked around, not doing the dance. A tall robed figure, probably an angel, came up behind him or her. The tail personage put his hands on the shoulders of the rebel, lifted him up, and hurled him into the middle of the pole. There was no splash. The soup was too thick for that, just a plop. After about 10 minutes, a head appeared, looking around wildly. When he saw the place he had vacated, he screamed and began to attempt to swim toward it. But swimming was impossible. The excrement was too thick. The frantic efforts of this person to regain his former place were so pathetic, I could not bear to look any longer. I could not bear to look any longer. I blamed Christ. He should have done something to keep me from being assigned to this dance of living dead. Were we really alive? Were we really alive? Probably not. Why wouldn't a priest or a preacher do something? Why didn't my mother and father go to church so I could have learned about God? Right foot forward, right foot back, left foot forward, left foot back, 2 steps to the right. Forever, forever. Perhaps the worst feature of being sent to hell is that we never again will be with our loved ones. We never again can go home. We are wise if we obey Christ when we know what He desires of us. I heard a ringing. It will not stop. I yelled, "Stop! Stop!" I stopped dancing. The people and the pool began to fade away. They fade away. Then I realized I was lying on my back on the large bed in the hotel room. The telephone on the little inn table was ringing. I kept trying to roll over to pick up the receiver, but I was shaking so hard from fear that I couldn't move in the right direction. I finally reached the receiver and promptly dropped it. I fumbled around, located the receiver, and replaced it. The phone had stopped ringing. Thank God. Thank God. I never had been so frightened in my life. I got out of the bed and went into the bathroom and vomited. I came back out and looked at the clock. I had been asleep 2 hours. I was too frightened to pray. I kept stammering, Jesus, please help me. I was crying and shaking and could not stop. I sat down on the bed. I do not remember taking off my clothes and getting in bed, but evidently I had thought I need to go to a hospital. I am having a nervous breakdown. I got up from the bed and put my clothes on hastily. I went to the elevator and pushed the button for the lobby. I noticed people staring at me. I ran through the lobby and hailed a taxi. The man took a look at me. He must have figured I was drunk. He asked, "Where to?" I answered, the nearest hospital." He said, "St. Luke? St. Luke?" I got in the back and laid back, still shaking. "Still shaking," the man said. St. Luke was only a couple of miles from the hotel, so we were there almost immediately. I recognized the hospital of my nightmare. Nevertheless, I opened the door of the cab, jumped out, and started running toward the entrance. "Hey," the driver yelled. I ran back, reached for my billfold, and pulled out the first bill I got hold of. It was a 20. Okay, it was a 20. I threw it at the driver and turned and started to run again toward the entrance to the hospital. I heard the driver say something about change, but that was not of interest to me at that point. I pulled the door open and went to the front desk. The elderly volunteer said, "Hello, how can I help you?" I know I look drunk with my shirt tail out, no tie, hair uncombed, and shaking. I said, "Something terrible happened and I need to speak with a doctor." He glanced at me and rang for a nurse. The nurse asked, "How can I help you, sir?" She was very pretty. In better times, I would have struck up a conversation. I said, "I need to talk to a doctor. I had a horrible nightmare or something." She considered my answer for a moment and then said, Please come with me." She led me into a large, comfortable room. She pointed to a sofa and said, "Please sit there and I will tell Dr. Goldstein you are waiting. He is a staff of psychiatrists." I sat trembling, trying to push the dream out of my mind. After about 5 minutes, Dr. Goldstein entered. I was so frightened, I gasped. Dr. Goldstein pulled up a chair, smiled, and said, What's the problem?" I said, "You look exactly like Jesus Christ." Dr. Goldstein had hair down to his shoulders, had a beard. He laughed at that. I have been called many names, but never the Christ. He laughed again, uproariously, and had to wipe away tears with his handkerchief. I suppose that laugh is part of his bag of tricks, because it sure helped me. It was so hearty and genuine, I began to think I might actually live again as a sane person. I recounted the dream, stopping every few minutes to get control of myself. Dr. Goldstein said, "I can understand why you are terrified. That indeed was a horrible experience." His laughter plus that last comment helped me a great deal. I actually stopped shaking. Then I remembered I had the dinner engagement and then the 7 o'clock meeting. I said, "Look, man, you." Then I remembered to whom I was speaking. I started again, "Sir, you have helped me more than I thought possible. I don't mean to be rude, but I do have dinner appointment and then a business meeting." It then was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I felt like eating just as much as I felt like swimming across the Nile River. Perhaps the hospital has a special need and I can contribute some money out of appreciation for your kind help. Dr. Goldstein said, the fact is, we are thinking of adding a children's wing. And so a couple of $100 will be helpful if you find you can spare it. I took out my checkbook, took out a check, and handed it to him. My hands are shaking, so I cannot make out this check. Would you be so kind, make it out for $5,000 and I will sign it? Then looking at Dr. Goldstein, I remembered Christ in the form of the nun asking for a donation to an orphanage. Dr. Goldstein said, that is a lot of money. Perhaps you should think it over first. He handed the check back to me and I tore it up. I took out another check and handed it to Dr. Goldstein. Make it out for $100,000. Make it out for $100,000. Dr. Goldstein said, I will put it in the hospital safe. We will keep it until you call and tell us this is what you really want to give. I said, don't be concerned. I have over $2 million in the bank. I won't even fill $100,000. I signed the check, shook the doctor's hand, and then walked out of the hospital. Wow, I figured I would walk the short distance to the hotel. My head felt light and clear. I tucked in my shirt tail and buttoned my shirt. What an absolute miracle that my feelings were so different from a few minutes ago. I look up to heaven. I prayed, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I am so ashamed. I am so ashamed of myself. I could have been of help to so many people and wasted on myself my God-given talents for business. I thank you for the dream of the dance of the living dead. As terrifying as it was, it helped me to turn my thinking around. I think tomorrow I will visit that orphanage and see what $50,000 can do for them. My dream took place more than 3 years ago. To this day, when I think of it, I start trembling. What if Christ had not awakened me? What if Christ had not awakened me? Today I will be staring at the pool of filth. I will be putting my right foot out and then my left foot and then stepping sideways. The drum beat, the spasms, the oppressive heat. I would have no hope of doing anything else for eternity. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Amen. I hope that you were challenged with this fiction. God bless you, and I will see you in the next episode.